You know that specific kind of silence that happens inside a car when it's snowing? It's not actually silent, of course. There's the hum of the engine, the heater blasting that dry, dusty air into your face, the rhythmic thump swish of the wipers fighting a losing battle against the glass. But the world outside goes mute. The snow dampens everything. It swallows the road noise, swallows the horizon, until you feel like you're floating in a grey void. That's where I was. Interstate 80, somewhere between Cheyenne and Laramie, Wyoming. December 23rd. My name is Elias, and if I had known what was waiting for me in that white void, I would have turned my rig around, driven it off a cliff, and taken my chances with the drop. I was driving a Peterbilt 579, hauling 40,000 pounds of frozen processed beef destined for Salt Lake City. The irony isn't lost on me. Hauling frozen meat while slowly freezing to death myself. The storm wasn't supposed to be this bad. The weather apps had called for a heavy dusting, maybe 3 to 5 inches. But Wyoming weather doesn't care about algorithms. By 2 p.m., the sky had turned the color of a bruised plum, dark purple and heavy. By 3 p.m., the wind was hitting 40 miles an hour, pushing the trailer sideways, making the whole rig shudder like a nervous dog. And by 4 p.m., we stopped moving. It wasn't a sudden stop. It was that slow, agonizing death of momentum. You know the feeling. You drop from 65 to 50, then 40. Then you're crawling at 10, watching the brake lights of the SUV in front of you bloom like angry red flowers in the swirling snow. Then, nothing. Just a sea of red taillights stretching out as far as I could see, which, given the visibility, was about 50 yards. I pulled the parking brake. The air hiss sounded loud in the cab. I leaned back, rubbing grit out of my eyes. My thermos was empty, just the bitter dregs of gas station coffee left at the bottom. I checked the dashboard clock. 4:12 p.m. Great, I muttered. Just great. I grabbed my CB radio mic. I don't use it much these days. Most chatter has moved to apps or phones, but in a storm like this, the old school guys still talk. Breaker 19, this is Big Blue. Anybody got eyes on what's choking us up? Over. Static. Just that white noise crackle. I tried again. Looking for a bear report or a wreck. Mile marker 300. Anybody copy? Nothing but static. But this time, it was different. It wasn't just the empty hiss of an open channel. It was interference. A rhythmic pulsing sound, like a heartbeat, cutting through the noise. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. I turned the squelch knob, trying to clear it up, but the pulse just got louder. I frowned and hung the mic back up. Probably just the storm messing with the towers or the power lines. I looked out the driver's side window. The snow was coming down horizontally now. The wind was howling, a high-pitched shriek that vibrated against the glass. Below me, in the lane to my left, sat a grey Honda Civic. Inside, I could see a woman in a puffy yellow coat. She was on her phone, gesturing wildly, arguing with someone. I couldn't hear her, obviously, but I could read the body language. Stress. Panic. Behind her was a family in a Ford Explorer. Roof rack loaded with luggage. Kids in the back seat. I could see the glow of tablets illuminating their faces. Watching cartoons, oblivious to the fact that we weren't moving. It felt normal. Frustrating, sure. Annoying, absolutely. But normal. It was just a traffic jam in a blizzard. I'd been in 100 of them. You wait an hour, the plows come through, the tow trucks drag the jackknifed idiot out of the median, and you go home. I decided to call Sarah. I pulled my phone out. 1 bar of service. It was flickering in and out. I dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Eli. Her voice was choppy, cutting out every other syllable. Hey, honey, I said, leaning closer to the windshield as if that would help the signal. Look, I'm stuck. I-80 is a parking lot. Weather turned nasty. News says, blizzard warning, state police closing. I know I'm in it, I said. I'm probably going to be late. Don't wait up for dinner. Eli, are you safe? The news is weird. Weird how? I asked. Reports of rioting in Cheyenne, hospitals, lockdown. The signal dropped. The call failed. I stared at the screen. Rioting? In a blizzard? That didn't make sense. People don't riot when it's 5 degrees below zero. They hunker down. They drink cocoa. They complain on Facebook. They don't riot. I tried to call her back, but the signal was gone completely. No service. A sudden thud shook the cab. I jumped, dropping the phone. It clattered into the footwell. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked around. Something had hit the side of my truck. I rolled down the window. Just a crack. The cold air rushed in instantly, biting at my face like icy needles. Hey! I shouted. Watch it! Down below, walking between the lanes of stalled cars, was a man. He wasn't wearing a coat, just a t-shirt and jeans. He was stumbling, bouncing off the fenders of the cars. He'd slammed into my fuel tank. Buddy, I yelled, get back in your car. You're gonna freeze. He didn't look up. He didn't even acknowledge me. He just kept walking, heading toward the front of the traffic jam. The wind whipped his hair around his face. His skin, even from up here in the fading light, his skin looked wrong. It wasn't pale from the cold. It was flushed, deep, angry red, like a severe sunburn. Steam was rising off him. Actual steam. He was radiating heat in the freezing air. I watched him stumble past the Honda Civic. The woman in the yellow coat saw him too. She rolled down her window. I saw her shout something at him, probably asking if he needed help. The man stopped. He stood perfectly still for a second, the snow piling up on his shoulders. Then he turned his head. I couldn't see his face clearly, just the angle of his neck. It snapped around too fast, unnaturally fast. He lunged at the Civic's window. The woman screamed. I heard it even over the wind, a high, thin sound of pure terror. She tried to roll the window up, but the man, this guy in a t-shirt, jammed his arm through the opening. He wasn't trying to open the door. He was clawing at her, thrashing. I reached for my door handle. I'm a big guy, and I carry a tire thumper, a weighted wooden club, under my seat. My instinct was to get out and help, but then I saw the blood. It sprayed against the inside of the Civic's windshield, a thick, dark crimson spray. The man in the t-shirt pulled the woman through the half-open window. It shouldn't have been physically possible. The glass shattered. He dragged her out onto the snowy asphalt like she weighed nothing. My hand froze on the door handle. My brain couldn't process the geometry of violence I was seeing. It was too fast, too brutal. The woman in the yellow coat stopped screaming. The man fell onto her. He wasn't punching her. He was biting. He was tearing. And then the doors of the other cars started opening. The dad from the Ford Explorer stepped out, a tire iron in his hand. "Hey!" he shouted. "Get off her!" The man in the t-shirt snapped his head up. His face was painted red. His eyes, I swear to God, his eyes were glowing, not like a monster in a movie, but reflective, wide and bloodshot, bursting with vessels. He hissed. It was a wet, guttural sound. And then he abandoned the woman and sprinted at the dad. He didn't slip on the ice. He didn't shiver. He ran with a terrifying, jerky coordination. The dad swung the tire iron, but the attacker didn't care. He took the blow to the shoulder, a hit that should have shattered his clavicle, and tackled the dad into the snowbank. "Lock the doors," I whispered to myself. My hands were shaking so bad I fumbled the lock switch twice before it clicked. "Lock the doors. Lock the doors." Down the line of traffic, I saw movement. More people getting out of cars to see what the commotion was. And from the darkness ahead of us, from the front of the traffic jam, more figures were coming. They were running. Not away from something. They were running toward us. Dozens of them. Some were in winter coats, some in pajamas, some in half-shredded clothes. They were all sprinting through the knee-deep snow, climbing over hoods, sliding across roofs. They moved like a wave of army ants. And the sound hit me. It wasn't the wind anymore. It was a cacophony of screams, metal crunching, and that horrible, wet hissing. I scrambled back into my seat, checking my mirrors. Behind me, the traffic was bumper to bumper. There was nowhere to go. I was in an 80-foot-long vehicle weighing 40 tons, sandwiched between a minivan and a concrete barrier. A body slammed against my passenger side window. I yelled, scrambling away from the glass. It was a teenage boy. He was clawing at the window, smearing blood and saliva against the glass. He was screaming, but not for help. He was screaming in rage. He slammed his forehead against the window. Thud, thud, thud. The glass spider-webbed. These trucks have tough glass, but it wasn't bulletproof. "Get away!" I shouted, grabbing the tire thumper. The boy looked at me. His skin was boiling. I could see the veins pulsing in his neck, thick and black. He opened his mouth, and I saw teeth broken to jagged points. Suddenly, he stopped. He pulled his face away from the glass. He sniffed the air. He looked down, beneath my cab, toward the fuel tanks, toward the exhaust stack, the heat. He wasn't trying to get to me because he was hungry. He was trying to get inside because it was warm. The virus, or whatever this was, it was burning them up from the inside, but the cold outside was freezing their extremities. They needed heat to keep moving. He scrambled down the side of the truck, disappearing from my view. A second later, I heard the metal cover of my battery box rattling. "No, no, no," I breathed. I looked forward. The Ford Explorer was overrun. The windows were smashed. I couldn't see the kids anymore. The woman in the yellow coat was gone, buried under the snow, and the wave was moving past me. They were swarming the cars behind me. I realized then that this wasn't a riot. This wasn't a medical emergency. This was the end of the world, happening in real time, in a blizzard on I-80. I grabbed my CB mic again. My hand was trembling so violently the cord rattled against the dashboard. "Breaker 19. Anyone receiving. Do not open your doors. Do not get out of your vehicles. Repeat, stay inside." Static. And then, a voice. Clear, calm, terrifyingly close. "Big Blue, this is Rubber Duck in the shaker behind you. You seein' this?" Tell me I ain't seeing this. I checked my mirror. The shaker, a cattle hauler, was 3 cars back. I see it, Duck. Keep your doors locked. Roll your windows up tight. They're tearing into the Honda, Blue. They're eating the upholstery. They're ripping the engine cover off. They want the heat. 15 minutes and 40 seconds, my eyes darted to my temperature gauge. The engine was idling. Nice and warm. A beacon. A massive, cast-iron wood stove in the middle of an ice age. Duck, I said, my voice cracking. If we turn the engines off, we freeze. It's 5 below and dropping. And if we leave 'em on, they swarm us, Duck replied. I looked out the windshield. The snow was falling harder now, creating a white curtain. But through the gaps, I saw them. Shadows moving in the red glow of brake lights. They were methodical now. They weren't just running blindly. They were checking door handles, smashing windows, dragging screaming drivers out into the snow, not to eat them, but to steal their coats, their warmth, their cars. I saw a man in a business suit get pulled out of a Mercedes. 3 of the infected tackled him. They didn't bite him. They just piled on top of him, like a rugby scrum, absorbing his body heat until he stopped moving. Then they broke the car window and piled inside the vehicle, cramming 4-5 bodies into the front seat, basking in the heat events. It was horrific. It was distinct. It was a biological imperative gone wrong. We have to move, I said to the empty cab. We can't sit here. I shifted into low gear. I released the parking brake. Blue, what are you doing? Duck's voice crackled. I'm not dying in a box, Duck. I'm making a hole. I revved the engine. The turbo whined, a high-pitched whistle that cut through the storm. Bad move. Every head within 50 yards turned toward me. The whistle was a dinner bell. The teenage boy who had been messing with my battery box popped his head up. He shrieked, a sound that made my teeth ache. And then they charged. Not 1 or 2, 20 of them, coming from the median, coming from the breakdown lane, scrambling over the tops of the stalled sedans. I stomped on the gas. The massive tires spun on the ice, then caught traction. The truck lurched forward. Crunch. I hit the bumper of the minivan in front of me. I pushed it. The driver inside was screaming, honking his horn. I didn't care. Survival is a selfish thing. I pushed the minivan sideways, grinding it against the concrete barrier. Metal screamed against metal. Sparks showered down, hissing in the snow. Move! I roared, gripping the steering wheel. But the infected were faster. They were on the running boards. They were on the hood. I saw hands, bloody, frostbitten hands, grabbing my windshield wipers and ripping them off. Visibility dropped to 0. I was blind, driving a 40-ton battering ram into a white void, covered in monsters. The passenger side glass shattered. Cold air and a screaming, steaming body tumbled into the cab with me. The smell hit me first. Copper blood and rotting meat, but also something chemical, like burning ammonia. The infected, a woman in a shredded nurse's uniform, scrambled over the gear stick. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the heater vents on the dashboard. She jammed her face against the plastic slats, breathing in the hot air, moaning in pleasure. Then she saw me. She hissed, her jaw unhinging, revealing a throat that glowed with feverish heat. She lunged across the cab. I raised the tire thumper. Not today, I grunted. I didn't pass out, but I lost time. Maybe only a few seconds. The world tilted sideways. I was jammed against the driver's door, the seatbelt cutting into my chest like a wire garrote. The truck had jackknifed. I must have slammed the brakes after I hit her. The cab was silent, except for the wind whistling through the shattered passenger window, and the wet, dripping sound coming from the floorboard. I looked over. The woman, the thing that used to be a nurse, was slumped in the footwell. My tire thumper was still in my hand, slick with something dark and viscous. She wasn't moving, but the heat radiating off her body was intense. It was like sitting next to an open oven door. My engine had stalled. The dashboard was dark. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to seize my throat. Restart it, my brain screamed. Restart the truck. Get the heater going. Move. My hand went to the key. I gripped the plastic fob. Thump. A heavy weight landed on the roof of the cab. I froze. My hand hovered over the ignition. Scrape. Scrape. Something was crawling on the roof. I could hear claws, or maybe fingernails, dragging against the fiberglass fairing. Then another thump on the hood. Then another. I slowly, agonizingly slowly, turned my head to look out the windshield. The wipers were gone, ripped away. The glass was cracked. But through the swirling snow, I could see them. Silhouettes. Dark shapes huddled against the grill of my truck. They were pressing their bodies against the chrome, against the hood. There must have been 5 of them, maybe more. They were writhing, fighting each other for position, trying to get as close to the dying engine block as possible. They weren't attacking the truck anymore. They were leeching it. I realized then, with a clarity that made my stomach turn, that if I turned that key, if I sparked that engine to life, the vibration and the fresh heat would drive them into a frenzy. They would tear the doors off to get inside. I took my hand off the key. "Okay," I whispered. The word was just a puff of steam in the air. "Okay. Stay quiet." The cold was already invading. With the passenger window shattered, the blizzard had an open invitation. The temperature in the cab was dropping by the second. I could feel the wind swirling around my ankles, carrying snowflakes that settled on the dashboard dials. I needed to seal the breach. I unbuckled my seatbelt. The click sounded like a gunshot in the small space. The shapes on the hood paused. One of them turned its head toward the glass. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The creature waited, listened, then turned back to the warmth of the hood. I moved inch by inch. I reached behind the driver's seat into the sleeper berth. My fingers brushed against my duffel bag, my pillow, and then, yes, my heavy winter coat, and a roll of duct tape I kept in the side pocket. I grabbed the coat and a thick wool blanket from the bunk. I knew I couldn't fix the window, not with them right there, but I could build a cocoon. I didn't put the coat on yet. Instead, I carefully draped the wool blanket over the gap between the driver's and passenger's seats, hanging it from the overhead compartments. It wasn't a perfect seal, but it blocked the direct line of sight to the broken window. It blocked the worst of the wind. I sat back in the driver's seat, huddled in the corner, and pulled my heavy parka on. I zipped it up to my chin. I pulled my beanie down over my ears. And I waited. Time behaves differently when you're freezing. It stretches. It becomes physical. I watched the temperature gauge on the dash. The needle was dead, but I could feel the engine cooling. I could hear it. The metal was contracting. Tick, tick, tick. Every time the engine ticked, the things on the hood hissed. They were losing their heat source. They were getting agitated. I needed to know what was happening out there. I needed to know if I was the only one left. I reached for the CB mic again. I didn't dare speak out loud. But I had a headset. I plugged it in, putting the earpiece in my ear. I keyed the mic, cupping my hand over it to muffle the sound. "Duck," I whispered. "Duck, you there. Static. Duck. Miller, please." A moment of silence. Then, a voice in my ear. So quiet it was barely there. "I'm here, Blue. I'm here." Relief washed over me, so strong it almost made me dizzy. "Status." "I'm locked down," Miller whispered. "Engine off. Lights off." I got curtains drawn. But I can hear 'em. They're all over the rig, Blue. They're scraping at the stacks. "They want the heat," I said. "The virus, or whatever it is. It hypermetabolizes. It burns them out. They need external heat to keep the reaction going." "How do you know that?" "I got a dead one in the cab with me," I said grimly. "She's like a radiator." "Jesus. Blue. You hurt?" "No. Listen, Miller. My passenger window is gone. I'm exposed. I can't stay here. When the engine block goes cold, they're gonna come looking for the next warmest thing. That's me. Where you gonna go? You step outside, you freeze, or they get you." "I have a reefer trailer," I said, the idea forming as I spoke. "It's insulated. The walls are 4 inches of foam. If I can get inside the trailer, I can seal it. It'll hold my body heat better than the cab." "The reefer unit?" Miller asked. "Is it running?" My eyes went wide. "The trailer. The Thermo King refrigeration unit." I was hauling frozen beef. The unit was set to -10 degrees. It ran on a separate diesel engine mounted on the front of the trailer, right behind the cab. If that engine was running, I listened. Over the wind, over the breathing of the infected on the hood, I heard it. A low, rhythmic chugging rumble coming from behind me. Chug, 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 chug. The reefer was running. It was generating heat. A lot of it. And it was loud. "It's running," I whispered. "Miller, the reefer is running. That's a dinner bell, Blue. They're gonna swarm it." He was right. The engine for the cooling unit was high up, on the front face of the trailer. The infected couldn't reach it easily, but they would gather underneath it. They would pile up between the cab and the trailer. My escape route was blocked by a horde of heat-seeking monsters. "I have to turn it off," I said. "You have to get out to do that," Miller replied. "Switch is on the unit driver's side. You gotta climb the catwalk." I looked at the blanket hanging to my right. Beyond it lay the corpse of the nurse and the open window. Beyond that, the storm. "If I don't," I said, "they'll eventually figure out there's 40,000 pounds of meat in there. Or they'll just tear the unit apart trying to get to the motor. I need that trailer, Miller. It's my lifeboat." "Blue, wait." Miller's voice cut in, sharp. I got something on the emergency band. Channel 9. Switch over. Just listen." I hesitated, then clicked the dial on the radio over to Channel 9. The static was heavier here, but a voice was cutting through. It was a looped recording. Mechanical. Official. Emergency action message. This is a federal emergency broadcast. A biological containment event is in progress within the Rocky Mountain region. Interstate 80 is closed. Protocol wideout is in effect. All citizens are ordered to shelter in place. Do not attempt to evacuate. Do not start your vehicles. Thermal masking is recommended. Avoid generating heat. I repeat, avoid generating heat. Help is. The recording fizzled into a squeal of feedback, then looped. Protocol wideout is in effect. Protocol wideout. They knew. The government, the military, they knew these things hunted heat, and their advice was to freeze. Thermal masking was a fancy way of saying, let the cold take you. Did you hear it? Miller asked when I switched back. Yeah. Avoid generating heat. Easy for them to say. Blue, Miller said. I'm looking in my mirror. I can see your rig. I see the reefer light. Green light. It's bright. How many of them? I count 12, maybe 15. They're clustered right at the gap between your truck and the trailer. They're bathing in the exhaust from the reefer unit. I closed my eyes. 15 of them, standing exactly where I needed to go. I need a distraction, I said. I ain't coming out there, Blue. I got a wife at home. I ain't dying for you. I'm not asking you to come out, I said. I'm asking you to make some noise. You got air horns. Yeah. And you got high beams. Yeah. Okay. Here's the plan. On my mark, you light 'em up. You blast the horn. You flash the lights. You rev your engine. They'll swarm me, Miller argued. They will, I agreed. But your cab is sealed. Mine isn't. You draw them off for 10 seconds. Just long enough for me to get to the catwalk, kill the reefer engine, and get inside the trailer side door. And then I'm stuck with them? Then you kill the engine and go dark, I said. They have short attention spans. If you go cold, they'll wander off again. Please, Miller, I'm freezing to death in here. Silence. The wind shook the truck. The corpse in the footwell had stopped steaming. The cold was settling into my bones, a dull ache in my joints. Miller. All right, Miller sighed. All right, you crazy son of a bitch. But you owe me. You owe me a steak dinner. Deal. Get ready. I prepared myself. I checked the tire thumper. Good grip. I checked my pockets. Flashlight, folding knife. I tightened my scarf. I looked at the blanket curtain. I was going to have to go through the passenger side. Past the nurse. Out the broken window. On 3, I whispered. 1, 2, 3. Go. The reaction was instant. The truck shook violently as the infected on the hood launched themselves off. I heard them screaming, shrieking in response to the noise. They were pack animals. When one moved, they all moved. I tore down the blanket. The nurse's face was frozen in a death rictus, grey and slack. I stepped on the seat, then planted my boot on her shoulder. Sorry, lady, and shoved myself through the shattered window. The wind hit me like a physical blow. It sucked the breath right out of my lungs. The snow was blinding. I tumbled out of the cab, hitting the running board, then the asphalt. I slipped on the ice, my knees cracking against the pavement. I scrambled up. The air horns were still blasting behind me. I looked back. Miller's truck, the cattle hauler, was lit up like a Christmas tree. High beams, fog lights, clearance lights, and swarming all over it were the infected. They were sprinting through the snow, abandoning my truck, drawn to the light and sound. Sorry, Miller, I gritted out. I turned and ran toward the gap between my cab and the trailer. I grabbed the cold metal railing of the catwalk. My gloves slipped, then gripped. I hauled myself up. The reefer unit was screaming right next to my ear. Chug, chug, chug. Heat blasted from the exhaust vent. It felt amazing. It felt like life. But I had to kill it. I reached for the control panel. I flipped the cover open. Come on, come on. My fingers found the switch. Off. The chugging sputtered, coughed, and died. Silence rushed back in, filling the void. Now I had to get into the trailer. I swung down from the catwalk to the side door of the trailer, a small inspection door used for checking the cargo. I fumbled for my keys. My fingers were stiff, numb. Clang. I dropped the keys. No! I hissed. I dropped to my knees in the snow, frantically patting the ground. The darkness was absolute. The snow was burying everything. Behind me, the air horns stopped. Miller had gone dark. That meant the infected were confused. That meant they were looking for a new target. I heard a sniff. Close. Right behind me. I froze. I slowly turned my head. Standing 3 feet away, illuminated only by the faint, dying glow of my truck's marker lights, was a little girl, maybe 7 years old. She was wearing a pink snowsuit, but it was torn open. Her chest was bare, glowing with that unnatural, feverish heat. Steam curled off her skin. Her eyes were wide, black pits. She tilted her head. She looked at me. Then she looked at the heat vent of the reefer unit I had just turned off. It was still warm. She hissed. I found the keys. My hand closed around the metal fob in the snow. The girl shrieked, a sound too big for her small chest, and lunged. The thing about children, even when they are monsters, even when their eyes are black pits and their skin is steaming, is that your brain hesitates. It's a biological hardwire. You see a kid, you don't strike. You pause. That pause almost killed me. The girl hit me low, tackling my legs. It wasn't the impact that shocked me. It was the heat. Even through my insulated snow pants, I felt it. It was like a heating pad set to high, pressed instantly against my shin. She didn't weigh much, maybe 50 pounds, but she was strong. That hysterical, adrenaline-fueled strength you hear about when mothers lift cars off babies. Except she was using it to try and tear my calf muscle out. She hissed, burying her face into the fabric of my pants. I could feel the damp warmth of her breath, the moisture soaking through the nylon. "Get off!" I shouted. My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the gale. I didn't use the tire thumper. I couldn't bring myself to swing a club at a 7-year-old. Instead, I kicked. I chambered my free leg and drove the heel of my boot into her chest. It felt like kicking a bag of wet sand. She flew backward, sliding across the ice. She didn't tumble. She skidded on her hands and feet like a spider, claws digging into the asphalt to slow her momentum. She stopped 10 feet away. She didn't look hurt. She looked annoyed. She crouched, steam rising off her shoulders in wisps, preparing to spring again. And behind her, emerging from the white curtain of snow, I saw shadows. 3 more. Adults this time. Drawn by the scuffle. I scrambled upright, slipping, my hand gripping the keys so hard the edges bit into my palm. I lunged for the trailer's side door. The keyhole was waist high. My hands were shaking violently. Get it in. Get it in. The first try missed, scraping the metal. The girl shrieked again. A signal. The shadows charged. "Come on!" I screamed at the lock. The key slid in. I twisted. The latch mechanism was stiff, frozen grease fighting me, but it clicked. I yanked the handle. The door swung outward. I threw myself into the darkness. I didn't look back. I grabbed the internal handle and slammed the door shut. Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. The wind was gone. The screaming was gone. The chaos of Interstate 80 was instantly replaced by a dead, flat quiet. And the smell. You might think frozen meat doesn't smell. You'd be wrong. It has a scent. It smells like cold copper, like dust and old blood and ozone. It's a sterile, heavy smell that coats the back of your throat. I was breathing hard, gasping in the freezing air. It was darker than any night I'd ever seen. No ambient light. No street lamps. Just the void. I fumbled for the flashlight in my pocket. Click. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow corridor of horrors. On either side of me, hanging from the ceiling rails on heavy steel hooks, were the sides of beef. Massive, skinned carcasses wrapped in muslin cloth. They hovered there, row after row, fading into the darkness toward the back of the trailer. They looked like ghosts. Ghosts of giants. I was standing in the inspection gap, a small open space about 4 feet wide near the side door, left empty so the driver could check the load temperature. Bang. I spun around, swinging the light toward the door. Bang. Bang. Scratch. They were there, just on the other side of 4 inches of foam insulation and aluminum skin. I could hear them scratching at the metal. They could sense the heat I'd brought in with me. Or maybe they could just smell the life. I backed away until my back hit a frozen cow. It was hard as rock, cold enough to burn through my coat. I checked the temperature recorder on the wall. The digital display was dark. I'd killed the power, but the analog needle was resting at -5 degrees Fahrenheit. It was colder inside than it was outside. But there was no wind. "Okay," I whispered. My voice didn't echo. The meat absorbed the sound. "Okay, Elias. You're in the box. You're safe. Safe in a freezer." I slid down the wall, sitting on the grooved aluminum floor. My legs were trembling uncontrollably now. The adrenaline crash. I rubbed my shin where the girl had grabbed me. The fabric wasn't torn, but it was warm. Unnaturally warm. I needed to tell Miller I was alive. I pulled the headset cord out from my coat. "Duck," I whispered. "Duck, do you copy?" Static. The thick, insulated walls of the trailer were essentially a Faraday cage. They blocked radio signals. Damn it. I moved closer to the door, pressing the wire against the rubber seal, hoping a signal might leak through the gap. "Miller, rubber duck. If you can hear me. I made it. I'm in the reefer. I'm safe. Over." I held my breath, listening to the white noise in my earpiece. ZZZZZT. Blue. ZZZZT. See the door. ZZZZ. Close. It was garbage, but it was a voice. He knew I was inside. That had to be enough. I turned the flashlight off to save the battery. The darkness returned, heavy and suffocating. I sat there for what felt like an hour, just listening. Outside, the banging on the door eventually stopped. The scratching faded. Miller was right. They had the attention span of gnats. Once the heat signature faded, once the noise stopped, they moved on, probably back to Miller's truck, or to the next car down the line. I was alone. Or, I thought I was. It started as a sound so faint I thought it was my own blood rushing in my ears. A rhythmic, soft noise coming from the rear of the trailer, deep in the maze of hanging meat. Rustle. Scrape. I stiffened. The trailer was sealed. I had the only key to the side door. The rear doors were padlocked from the outside with a heavy-duty alloy lock. Nothing gets in a reefer trailer unless the driver lets it in. Maybe the load shifted? Sometimes, if the hooks aren't set right, a 2,000-pound side of beef can swing. Rustle. No, that was fabric. Synthetic fabric rubbing against the floor. I turned the flashlight back on. I aimed it down the narrow aisle between the rows of beef. The beam caught the white muslin cloth, casting long, dancing shadows that looked like grasping hands. "Hello," I called out. Silence. I stood up, gripping the tire thumper. My breath plumed in the light. "I have a weapon," I said, trying to sound like the scary trucker I definitely wasn't. "Come out." Nothing. I started walking. I had to turn my body sideways to squeeze between the carcasses. It was a claustrophobic nightmare. The frozen meat pressed against my chest and back, hard and unyielding. The smell of raw fat was overpowering this deep in the load. I counted the rows. 10 feet back. 20 feet back. Near the nose of the trailer, where the refrigeration unit's evaporator fan hung from the ceiling, there was usually a small space left for airflow. A return air bulkhead. I reached the end of the beef. I shone the light into the gap at the front wall. There, wedged between a pallet of frozen briskets and the front wall, was a pile of blankets. Old, dirty moving blankets. And in the middle of them, a sleeping bag. It was occupied. I saw a tuft of greasy hair sticking out of the top. The bag was rising and falling. Rapidly. Shivering. A stowaway. It happens. People desperate to get across the country, sneaking in while the driver grabs a shower, hiding behind the pallets. Usually, they freeze to death before they hit the state line. This guy must have had gear. "Hey," I said, keeping the light on his face. The sleeping bag unzipped. A man looked out. He was young, maybe early 20s. Gaunt face, patchy beard. His lips were blue. His eyes were wide, terrified, dilating in the sudden light. "Don't," he croaked. His voice was a wreck. "Don't open the door. Please." I lowered the club, but kept the light on him. "Who are you?" "Jax," he chattered. "Name's Jax. I hopped in at the Flying J in Sydney. I just wanted to get to Salt Lake." "You picked a hell of a time to hitch a ride, Jax," I said. "Is it?" He swallowed hard. "Is it stopped?" "The storm. The storm is the least of our problems," I said. He sat up, wrapping the sleeping bag tighter around himself. He looked at my leg, then at the tire thumper. "I heard you come in. I heard screaming outside. What's happening?" I looked at this kid. He was freezing, terrified, and trapped in a metal box with a stranger. I had to decide how much to tell him. If I told him the truth, that there were heat-seeking cannibals eating the traffic jam, he might snap. Panic in a sealed box is fatal. "There's unrest," I said carefully. "Riots. People are attacking vehicles. We're in a lockdown." Jax stared at me. "Riots? In a blizzard?" "Yeah. It's crazy out there." Jax looked down at his hands. He was wearing fingerless gloves. His knuckles were raw. "I saw something," he whispered. My stomach tightened. "What did you see?" "Before you came in. When we stopped." I looked out. "There's a drain hole in the floor. One of the washout plugs is missing." I looked down through it. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. I saw feet. Bare feet. Running in the snow. And I saw I saw a guy crawl under the trailer. He was glowing. Glowing. Yeah. Like red. Like he was hot. He pressed his back against the floorboards right under me. I could feel the heat coming through the aluminum. He stayed there for a minute, just vibrating, and then he ran off. Jax shivered violently. What kind of people glow, man? I sat down on a box of brisket across from him. There was no point in lying. He'd seen it. They aren't people anymore, Jax, I said. They're sick. And they hunt heat. That's why we're safe in here. We're cold. Jax laughed. It was a brittle, jagged sound. Safe? I can't feel my toes, man. I'm out of propane for my little heater. I was gonna bang on the door and turn myself in just to get warm before you jumped in. You have a heater? I asked sharply. A propane heater? Yeah. Little camp stove. But the canister is empty. Good, I said. Keep it empty. If you light a fire in here, you ring the dinner bell for every monster within a mile. We sat in silence for a moment. 2 rats in a freezer. So what's the plan? Jax asked. We just freeze. We wait, I said. Storm has to break eventually. Or the military comes. Protocol wideout is in effect. Protocol what? Never mind. Just know that help is theoretically coming. I checked my watch. 5:15 p.m. We had been stopped for over an hour. Then the truck shook. Not the trailer. The truck. The cab. I felt the vibration through the floor. It was a heavy, rhythmic rocking. Creak. What is that? Jax whispered. I stood up, moving back toward the side door. I pressed my ear against the insulated wall, toward the front of the trailer. Crunch. Glass breaking. Heavy metal rending. They're inside the cab, I said. They broke the cocoon. I could hear it now. Muffled thuds. They were tearing the seats apart. They were ripping the sleeper berth lining down. They were desperate for any lingering pockets of heat my body had left behind. And then, a new sound. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy footsteps on the roof of the trailer. Jax scrambled out of his sleeping bag. They're on the roof? Shoo! I waved the light at him. The footsteps moved slowly. Heavy. Deliberate. Walking right down the center line of the trailer roof, directly over our heads. Thump. Pause. Thump. Pause. It stopped directly above us. Then, a sound that chilled my blood faster than the liquid nitrogen ever could. Scratch. 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 Metal on metal. What are they doing? Jax mouthed. I looked up at the ceiling. The roof vent, I whispered. There's a ventilation hatch for air circulation. It's right above the load. The scratching got louder, more frantic. They weren't just clawing blindly. They were working at the rivets. They knew where the weakness was. They can smell us, I realized. The vent isn't airtight. Our breath. Our heat. It's rising. It's venting right out the top. I looked at Jax. We have to plug it. How? We have to climb up the meat. Climb the meat. Jax hissed, looking up at the ceiling. Are you insane? Do you have a ladder in your pocket, Jax? I snapped, shining the light upward. Because unless you do, the cows are the stairs. The scratching above us changed. It became a tearing sound. Ryop. The aluminum skin of the trailer roof was tough. but the vent cover was just a plastic and mesh housing. They were peeling it away. "Boost me," I ordered. I didn't wait for him to agree. I stepped onto a cardboard box of frozen brisket, then planted my boot on the hip bone of a hanging carcass. It was like stepping on a granite boulder coated in ice. My foot slipped. "Jax, hold the damn cow steady." Jax scrambled forward, jamming his shoulder against the swinging side of beef to stop it from swaying. I grunted, hauling myself up. My gloves gripped the frozen muscle. I wrapped my arm around the shank, pulling myself higher. The cold was seeping through my coat, but I was sweating. I got my knee over the top of the carcass. I was now 6 feet in the air, balancing on a rounded, icy surface that wanted to roll beneath me. The ceiling was only 2 feet above my head. The vent was right there. The hatch popped open. A shaft of moonlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the swirling dust motes inside the trailer. Snow fluttered down, landing on my face. And then, the light was blocked. A face appeared in the hole. It was upside down. A woman. Her hair hung down into the trailer like greasy vines. Her skin was that terrible, boiled lobster red. She opened her mouth, and a string of thick, bloody saliva dripped down. It landed on my cheek. It sizzled. I swear to God, it hissed like acid. That's how hot her body fluids were. She saw me. Her eyes widened, the pupils contracting to pinpricks. She let out a shriek that reverberated inside the metal box, deafening me. "Help!" Jax screamed from below. "Do something!" The woman jammed her arm through the hole. She swiped at me. Her fingers were blackened, the nails gone, just raw bone and flesh. She was trying to reach the latch of the inner screen, trying to tear the hole wider. I was precariously balanced on a frozen cow, holding a tire thumper in one hand and a flashlight in the other. I didn't have the leverage to swing. "The sleeping bag!" I yelled down. "Jax, toss me the bag." "What?" "Throw it up here. Now!" I ducked as the infected woman slashed again, her hand missing my nose by an inch. I could feel the heat radiating from her arm. It was like a space heater being waved in my face. Jax bundled up his sleeping bag and heaved it. It hit me in the back, nearly knocking me off my perch. I fumbled, dropping the flashlight. It clattered to the floor, the beam spinning wildly, creating a strobe effect in the trailer. Darkness. Flash. Darkness. Flash. I grabbed the sleeping bag. "Get back!" I roared at the face in the hole. I jammed the bundle of synthetic down fabric upward. I shoved it right into her face. She bit it. She clamped her jaws onto the nylon and tore it, shaking her head like a rabid dog. Feathers exploded everywhere, filling the air like snow. But I kept pushing. I used the tire thumper like a ramrod, driving the sleeping bag into the vent opening, wedging it tight. She screamed, a muffled, angry sound, as I shoved the blockage deeper. I felt her claws raking against the other side of the bag, but she couldn't get through the thick insulation. "Tape!" I muttered. "Tape, tape, tape." I ripped the roll of duct tape from my pocket with my teeth. I tore off a strip. Then another. I began taping the sleeping bag in place, adhering it to the aluminum ceiling. I used half the roll. I created a silver web, sealing the breach. The pushing from above stopped. The heat source was gone. I slumped back, sitting on the frozen beef, my head scraping the ceiling. I was panting. My heart felt like it was going to burst. Did you get it?" Jax's voice trembled from the dark floor below. "Yeah," I wheezed. "It's plugged." I slid down from the carcass, my boots hitting the floor with a heavy thud. I picked up the flashlight. The lens was cracked, but it still worked. I shone it on Jax. He was covered in goose feathers. He looked ridiculous and terrified. "They know we're here now," he said. "They knew we were here before," I corrected. "Now they just know they can't get in." I checked the temperature. My breath was freezing instantly in front of my face. The trailer was holding at -5, but without the reefer running, it would eventually warm up. Slowly. Very slowly. But the immediate problem wasn't the heat. It was the cold. "We need to huddle," I said. "We lost the sleeping bag." Jax looked at the feathers on the floor. "That was my only gear, man. It saved our lives. Come here. Sit against the wall." We sat down in the inspection gap again. I opened my heavy parka. "Get in. Sideways. We share body heat." Jax hesitated, then moved close. We sat shoulder to shoulder, my coat draped over both of us like a tent. It was awkward. It was intimate in a way two strangers shouldn't be. But survival strips away dignity pretty fast. "So," Jax said, his teeth chattering, "you think the army is coming?" "Protocol wide out," I murmured. "They said it on the radio. They know about this." "Wide out." Jax tested the word. "Sounds like erasure. Like burying something. Don't talk like that." 57 minutes and 50 seconds we sat in silence for a long time. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. The cold began to creep back in, finding the gaps in our clothing. My toes were numb. I couldn't feel my nose. I checked my watch. 6:45 p.m. We had been stuck for nearly 3 hours. Outside, the wind had died down slightly. The scratching on the roof had stopped completely. "Hey," Jax whispered. "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Low hum. Like bees." I listened. I pressed my ear to the wall again. He was right. A drone. A vibration. But it wasn't bees. And it wasn't the wind. It was heavy engines. Many of them. Far away, but getting closer. "Trucks?" I asked. "Maybe plows." "No," Jax said. "Too rhythmic. Too synchronized." I scrambled up, my stiff joints popping. I went to the side door. I didn't open it. I wasn't crazy. But I put my eye to the crack in the seal where the rubber gasket had worn thin. I couldn't see much. Just darkness and snow. But then, the sky lit up. Not with lightning. With flares. 3 bright red stars burst overhead, hanging in the sky, drifting down slowly on parachutes. They bathed the highway in a blood-red glow. In that crimson light, I saw them. The infected were everywhere. Hundreds of them. They were standing on top of the cars. They were crouched in the snow. And they were all looking in the same direction. West. Toward the sound of the engines. "Flares," I whispered. "Military flares. They're here." Jax scrambled up, hope flooding his voice. "They're here to save us." "Wait," I said, grabbing his arm. The hum grew to a roar. And then, the first vehicle crested the hill about a half-mile back. It wasn't a rescue ambulance. It wasn't a bus. It was a snowplow. But not a DOT plow. This was a massive, armored military engineering vehicle. An M9 ACE. A tank with a dozer blade. And behind it, a column of Stryker armored fighting vehicles. They were moving fast. pushing the stalled cars out of the way like toys. Crunching over them. "They're clearing the road," Jack said, grinning. "They're clearing a path." I watched as the lead plow hit a cluster of infected. It didn't slow down. It didn't honk. It churned them under the treads. But then I saw the turret on the lead striker rotate. A heavy machine gun, a .50 caliber. It leveled out. Thump, 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 thump. The gun flashed. Tracers zipped through the red air. They weren't just shooting the infected. I watched as the rounds tore through a Honda Odyssey that was clearly occupied. I saw the driver waving his hands. The van disintegrated. "Jax," I said, my voice cold. "Get down. Get away from the door." "Why?" "We have to signal them. They aren't rescuing anyone, Jax." I watched the convoy advancing, a ruthless wall of steel and fire. Protocol wideout isn't a containment plan, I realized, stepping back into the darkness of the trailer. It's a sterilization plan. They're scrubbing the timeline. 1 hour and 2 minutes the infected screamed, a collective wail of rage. They charged the convoy. The heat seekers against the heat bringers. It was a massacre. The infected swarmed the tanks, drawn to the massive, hot engines. They clogged the treads. They blocked the viewports. And the soldiers just kept firing. A stray round pinged off the side of our trailer. Clang. We are trapped between an army that wants to kill us and monsters that want to eat us, I said. Jax slumped against the beef. "So what do we do?" I looked at the meat surrounding us. The cold, dead weight. "We have to go deeper," I said. "We have to hide. If they scan this trailer with thermal, they'll see 2 heat blobs in the front. We need to mask ourselves." I pulled my knife out. I looked at the hanging side of beef next to me. "We have to cut it open," I said. "We have to get inside the meat. It's like concrete," I hissed, pulling the knife back. The blade was chipped. I had tried to stab into the flank of the hanging cow next to me, thinking I could carve out a space, a hollow to crawl into. It was a stupid idea. Industrial deep-frozen beef is harder than oak. You don't cut it with a pocket knife. You cut it with a bandsaw. "They're coming, Elias." Jax whimpered. He was practically vibrating with fear. "I can hear the treads." He was right. The clank-clank-clank of the tank treads was audible even through the insulated walls. And the gunfire was continuous now. Thump-thump, thump-thump. The rhythm of a heavy-caliber extermination. I looked at the meat. Row after row of pale, muslin-wrapped ghosts. "We can't cut them," I said, my mind racing. "So we become them." I grabbed Jax by the collar of his coat. "The rib cage. It's a cavity. It's concave." I spun him around and shoved him toward the hanging carcass. "Get in there. Back into the ribs. Hug the spine." "It's freezing," Jax argued, pulling back. "It's thermal masking." I snapped. "The meat is -5 degrees. Your body is 98. If you press your back against the bone and wrap the shroud around you, the thermal camera sees a cold spot with a warm center. It looks like the core of the meat hasn't frozen yet. It breaks up the silhouette." I didn't wait for him to agree. I physically lifted him. He was light, malnourished maybe, and jammed him backward into the hollow of the split carcass. He gasped as the frozen bone pressed against his spine. "Pull the cloth," I ordered. "Pull the muslin over your face. Don't move. Don't breathe deeply." I grabbed the carcass hanging next to him, on the chaotic swinging rail, and shoved it hard. It slid along the grease, slamming into the one Jax was hiding in. Thud. Now he was sandwiched, hidden between two slabs of frozen death. "Elias!" came a muffled voice from the meat. "Shut up, Jax." I scrambled for my own spot. I found a large steer hanging 3 feet away. I backed into the rib cage. The cold was instant and shocking. It bit through my parka, through my flannel, straight to the skin. It felt like leaning back against a wall of dry ice. I reached out and grabbed the neighboring hook. I hauled on it. The second carcass swung toward me. I ducked my head, pulling the stiff, frozen muslin shroud across my chest like a curtain. The two sides of beef collided with me in the middle. I was crushed in a frozen embrace. Darkness. The smell of raw tallow and old blood filled my nose, thick and suffocating. And just in time, the trailer floor jumped. Something heavy, one of the strikers, had just rammed the rear of my truck. I felt the shockwave travel up through my boots. The carcasses swayed, banging against each other. Thud, thud. Thud, thud. I held my breath. I tried to slow my heart rate. Be cold, I told myself. Be dead. Be meat. The roar of the engine idled down right next to the trailer. I could hear the turret motor whining. Whir-click. They were scanning. I squeezed my eyes shut, as if that would help. I imagined the display screen inside that armored vehicle. A world of blues and blacks. The truck engine, hot white. The wheels, warm orange. And the trailer, a long blue rectangle. Please let it be blue. I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my temple. If it froze on my cheek, fine. If it dripped onto the floor, a hot droplet in a cold world, it might sparkle on their sensors like a diamond. Whir. The turret moved. Then, a voice. Not on the radio this time. Amplified by a loudspeaker. Distorted. Electronic. Sector 4 clear. No biologicals. No heat signatures. My lungs burned. I needed to exhale, but I held it. Wait, a second voice crackled. Movement. Ground level. Under the trailer. My blood froze. Jax. Had he moved? Rat-tatatatatatatatat. A lighter machine gun opened up. The sound was deafening. Bullets shredded the underside of the trailer. I heard them tearing through the aluminum floor, zipping upward into the cargo. Thwack, thwack. Rounds impacted the beef I was hiding inside. I felt the carcass jerk. A bullet had buried itself in the shoulder of the steer, 6 inches above my head. Shards of frozen bone sprayed against my hair. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. I didn't flinch. I couldn't flinch. A scream from outside. Not human. An infected. Target neutralized. The loudspeaker droned. Just a straggler. Hiding in the wheel well. It wasn't us. It was one of them. Continue advancing. Push the wreckage to the shoulder. Clear the lane. The engine roared again. The heavy treads clattered. The vehicle moved on. I stayed in the meat. I stayed there for a long time. I listened as the next vehicle passed. And the next. A column of iron giants marching west, grinding the world into paste. Eventually, the roar faded to a hum. The hum faded to a buzz. And the silence of the blizzard returned. I pushed the carcass away. My arms were stiff, my muscles cramping from the cold. I stumbled out of my hiding spot and fell to my knees. Jax! I croaked. Silence. Jax. Panic flared. The bullets had come up through the floor. A rustling sound. The muslin parted on the other side of the aisle. Jax tumbled out. He looked blue. Literally blue. His lips were trembling so hard he couldn't speak. He checked his body, patting his chest, his legs. I'm okay, he stuttered. Missed me. We were alive. But we were in trouble. We have to get out, I said. We're hypothermic. If we stay in here now, we just go to sleep and never wake up. I shined the flashlight at the door. The soldiers, they're gone? Jax asked. The first wave is gone. They cleared the road. But that means the road is open. I moved to the side door. My hand was a claw. I had to use 2 hands to grip the latch handle. I pushed. The door cracked open. The scene outside had changed. The snow was still falling, but the chaos was gone. In its place was a graveyard. The cars were flattened, crushed, pushed to the sides of the highway into massive berms of twisted metal and snow. The road itself, the blacktop, was scraped clean. And the bodies. I looked down. The snow around the trailer was stained pink. The military hadn't taken prisoners. They hadn't triaged. They had sanitized. Oh God, Jax whispered, looking over my shoulder. I stepped down from the trailer. My legs almost buckled. The air was crisp, cleaner than before. The smell of exhaust was gone, replaced by the smell of cordite. My truck, I said. I looked at the cab of my Peterbilt. The driver's side was smashed in. The hood was crushed where a tank had seemingly nudged it aside. The windshield was gone. But the fuel tanks looked intact. Jax, I said, a desperate idea forming. Check the other trucks. The ones pushed to the side. Look for diesel cans. Look for anything flammable. Why? Because we can't stay here, I said. And we can't walk to Cheyenne. It's 30 miles in a blizzard. I walked to the front of my truck. I popped the hood latches. One was broken, the other held. I heaved the fiberglass hood open. The engine block was cold. The belts were cut. The radiator was smashed. My rig was dead. But behind it was Miller's truck. The cattle hauler. It had been sideswiped, pushed partially into the median. The trailer was tipped at a 45-degree angle. I could hear the cattle inside, those that survived, lowing in panic. But the cab looked upright. Miller! I shouted. I ran through the snow. The door to Miller's truck was closed. The window was cracked, spiderwebbed but intact. I climbed up the running board. Duck! You in there? I peered through the glass. The dashboard lights were off. The interior was dark. I pulled the handle. Locked. I wiped the frost from the glass and shone my flashlight inside. Miller was there. He was sitting in the driver's seat. His head was tipped back. His eyes were closed. There was a small, neat hole in the side of his window glass, and a matching mess on the side of his head. He held a pistol in his lap. He hadn't let the infected get him, and he hadn't waited for the death squads. "Damn it, Miller," I whispered, resting my forehead against the cold glass. "Damn it." I took a breath. I didn't have time to mourn. I needed his truck. I used the tire thumper to smash the rest of the window out. I reached in, unlocked the door, and opened it. I unbuckled Miller. He was heavy, dead weight. I felt sick doing it, but I pulled him out. I lowered him gently into the snowbank beside his rig. "I owe you a steak dinner," I muttered. I won't forget. I climbed into the driver's seat. It was cold, but not as cold as mine. I put the key in the ignition. I turned it. Click. Nothing. Come on, I begged. Don't be dead. Don't be dead. I tried the headlights. Dim yellow glow. The batteries were drained. He must have left the lights on to draw the infected away from me. He'd killed his battery to save my life. Elias! Jax shouted from the road. I found gas. A whole jerry can. Bring it! I yelled. But we don't need gas. We need a jump. I looked at my dead truck. Then at Miller's dead truck. I had jumper cables in my side box. If I could bridge the batteries. If I could get just enough juice. Jax, grab the cables from my truck. Side box, driver's side. On it. We worked fast. The cold was a physical weight now, pressing down on us. Jax fumbled with the cables, his hands shaking. We hooked up my dead batteries to Miller's dead batteries. It wasn't enough. 2 zeros don't make a 1. It's not working, Jax said, near tears. It's not cranking. I looked around. The road was a wasteland of destroyed vehicles. Then I saw it. The reefer unit on my trailer. It had a separate battery. A heavy-duty deep cycle battery to start the diesel pony engine. I had turned the engine off, but the battery should still have a charge. The reefer, I said, pointing. The battery is 12 volts. Same as the truck. We pull it. It's bolted down. Then we unbolt it. Or we rip it out. We scrambled up the catwalk of my trailer. I used the tire iron from Miller's truck to pry at the bracket. Metal screeched. Sparks flew. Hurry, I grunted. My hands aren't working anymore. We tore the battery free. It weighed 60 pounds. We dropped it into the snow. We dragged it to Miller's truck. We hooked the cables to the reefer battery, then to Miller's starter terminals. Pray, I said to Jax. Whatever god you got, call him. I climbed into the cab. I pumped the clutch. I turned the key. Slow. Sluggish. The oil was thick as molasses. Cough. Come on, you beautiful disaster, I roared. Come on. Vroom. Black smoke poured from the stacks. The big diesel engine caught, stumbled, and then roared to life. The vibration shook the frame. Jax screamed in triumph outside, jumping up and down in the snow. I let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. I flipped the heater controls to max. Get in! I shouted. Get in! Jax scrambled into the passenger seat. We were mobile. We had heat. We had 40 tons of steel around us. But as the headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating the path the military had cleared, I saw something, about 100 yards ahead, standing in the middle of the cleared road, facing us. It was the military convoy's rear guard, a single Humvee. It was stopped. Its lights were off, but there was someone standing on top of it. Not a soldier. It was the man in the t-shirt, the first one I'd seen, the patient zero of the traffic jam. He was steaming. His skin was black with frostbite, but he was glowing with that internal fire. He stood on the roof of the military vehicle, holding something in his hand, a severed head, a helmeted, tactical gear-wearing head. He had killed the rear guard, and now he was looking at us, at our fresh, hot diesel smoke. He threw his head back and shrieked, and from the snowbanks on either side of the road, the survivors of the massacre began to rise. The infected hadn't been wiped out. They'd just been waiting for the tanks to pass. "Elias," Jax whispered, staring through the shattered windshield. "There's too many." He was right. They were pouring out of the snowbanks like ants disturbed from a hill. 50, maybe 100. And standing tall on the roof of the wrecked Humvee, the Alpha screamed again. It pointed at us, at the heat, at the noise. I reached down and grabbed the gear stick. It was an 18-speed manual. I jammed it into low gear. "Jax," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Buckle up. We can't go through them. They'll stop the truck. They'll clog the intakes." "We aren't going through them," I said, eyeing the Alpha. "We're going through him." I reached under the dash and yanked the trailer air supply valve, the red knob. There was a loud bang as the locking jaws on the fifth wheel opened. "Hold on." I floored the accelerator and popped the clutch. The truck bucked like a rodeo bull. With a screech of tearing metal, the cab tore free from the tipped trailer behind us. We were bobtailing now, just the tractor. Lighter, faster, but dangerous on ice. The drive tires spun, smoking against the asphalt, burning rubber. The smell of burning tires mixed with the diesel fumes. The Alpha roared. The horde charged. "Here we go," I shouted. The truck surged forward. I skipped gears. Third, fifth, seventh. The engine screamed. We hit 40 miles an hour in seconds. The first wave of infected hit the bumper. Thud, thud, crunch. It wasn't like hitting a deer. It was like hitting concrete pillars. The truck shuddered violently with each impact. Bodies flew into the air, cartwheeling into the dark. Blood sprayed across the hood, sizzling on the hot metal. But they didn't stop. They grabbed the grill. They grabbed the mirrors. "They're climbing!" Jack screamed, kicking at the passenger door as hands clawed at the window. Ahead, the Humvee loomed. The Alpha crouched on the roof, glowing like a furnace ember. He wasn't running. He was waiting. "Get off my road!" I roared. I didn't swerve. I aimed the massive chrome grille of the Peterbilt directly at the Humvee. At the last second, the Alpha leaped. He launched himself into the air, clearing the hood. Smash! The Humvee clipped my bumper, sending the truck lurching onto two wheels. We slammed back down, the suspension groaning. But the Alpha had landed. He was on the roof of the cab. I heard the metal buckle under his weight. The heat coming through the ceiling was instant. It felt like the sun had just set on top of the truck. Scrayer-ape! Claws tore through the aluminum roof skin like it was wet paper. "He's coming in!" Jax yelled. He scrambled backward, trying to squeeze into the sleeper berth. A hand, burned black, glowing red at the veins, punched through the roof liner right between the seats. I grabbed the wheel with one hand and reached for the CB mic cord with the other, wrapping it around my fist. "Take the wheel!" I shouted to Jax. "What?" "Grab the wheel. Keep it straight." Jax lunged across the console, grabbing the bottom of the steering wheel. I stood up in the driver's seat, my head brushing the ceiling. The Alpha's face appeared in the hole he'd torn. His eyes were boiling. His mouth was a maw of broken teeth. He hissed, spewing that hot, acidic saliva onto my shoulder. My parka smoked. I swung the CB mic. It was a heavy, chrome-plated astatic microphone. A solid brick of metal. I smashed it into his face. Crack. He didn't flinch. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was searing hot. I could feel my skin blistering under my coat sleeve. He started to pull me up. He was going to drag me out through the roof. The extinguisher! I choked out. Jax! Fire extinguisher! Under the seat. Jax let go of the wheel. The truck swerved wildly, sliding sideways on the ice. We were doing 60 miles an hour, drifting broadside down Interstate 80. Jax fumbled under the seat. He came up with a red canister. "Pin!" I yelled. "Pull the pin!" The Alpha roared, pulling harder. My feet left the floor. I was staring right into his molten eyes. Jax unleashed the CO2. A cloud of freezing white gas exploded into the cab, directed right at the hole in the roof. The reaction was violent. The Alpha screamed, a sound of pure agony. The extreme cold of the CO2 hitting his superheated physiology caused a thermal shock. I heard his skin crack like porcelain. He let go of my wrist. "Hard left!" I yelled, dropping back into the seat. I grabbed the wheel and jerked it. The truck whipped around. The centrifugal force was massive. The Alpha, blinded and freezing, lost his grip. I saw him slide off the roof. He tumbled through the air, hitting the asphalt at highway speed. He didn't get up. I corrected the skid, fighting the fishtail. The truck straightened out. We were through the blockade. The road ahead was empty. Dark, but empty. I looked at Jax. He was holding the empty extinguisher, his chest heaving, covered in white frost. "Did we?" He gulped air. "Did we win?" I looked in the rearview mirror. The red glow of the flares and the fires was fading behind us. The horde was just a dark smudge in the distance. "We survived," I said. "That's not the same as winning. We drove for hours. We didn't speak. We just listened to the hum of the engine and the wind." The blizzard began to break around 4 a.m. The snow stopped falling. The clouds parted, revealing a cold, indifferent moon. By dawn, we hit the Nebraska state line. There was a roadblock. Not a massacre this time. Just a standard National Guard checkpoint. Floodlights, barricades, young men in uniforms who looked scared. I rolled the window down as we approached. The soldier shone a light in my face. He saw the blood on the hood. He saw the hole in the roof. He saw the 1,000-yard stare in my eyes. "Sir," the soldier said, his voice trembling slightly, "Interstate 80 is closed. Protocol wideout. You aren't supposed to be here." I looked at him. I looked at the sunrise painting the snow pink, the same color as the blood back at mile marker 300. "I'm just delivering the mail, son," I rasped. He hesitated. He looked at the truck. Then he stepped back and waved us through. We made it to a truck stop in Sydney. Jax got out there. He said he was going to call his mom. I never saw him again. I hope he made it to Salt Lake. As for me, I stopped driving trucks. I couldn't handle the sound of the engine idling anymore. Every time I hear a radiator fan kick on, I flinch. I look for the glow. The news called it a chemical spill. They said a tanker overturned and released a hallucinogenic gas. They said the violence was mass hysteria. They said the bodies were lost to the cold. They lied. Protocol wideout wasn't about containment. It was about erasure. They wiped the map clean and pretended it never happened. But I know. And now, you know. So, the next time you're driving down the highway at night, and you see a traffic jam ahead, brake lights stretching into the fog, do me a favor. Check your temperature gauge. Check your locks. And if you see someone walking between the cars, without a coat, steam rising from their shoulders, don't roll down your window. Don't call for help. Turn off your engine. Turn off your lights. And pray that the cold takes you before they do.